There are 70 million families in the United States with somebody knows or has a disability in their family.
I think that this society is very much work-oriented. Our identities are very much based in what it is we do. It goes back to what I said about always being more prepared than the next person. It's kind of a fact of life that's how you have to be a lot of times.
I think individuals with disabilities often feel like they need to be a cut above and not just prove that you can do the job, but that you need to do it better than anyone else.
It forces you to be as good as you can possibly be on one hand, and on the other it's unfair that you have to put out that much more than someone else might because of your disability. Yeah. I speed listen. Everyone does this differently, but I believe in telling the person that I'm talking to about my disability up front and being honest about it. I'm legally blind. Actually, I am what I would call functionally blind. I have some residual vision in one eye and none in the other. In the job I'm in right now, the expectation of me is that I will be out in the community a fair amount. So what that means is that I have to be able to be mobile enough to do that. And I'm not a driver, obviously, and so I use Metro Mobility. And so the challenge for me has been to be able to get around to what I need to do in the community using that service. And I have been able to do it for the most part, as our workforce is less sedentary and more mobile. Most of the barriers that would be present in this job have accommodations for them. I mean, I have a computer that has text-to-speech output, so I can read whatever, pretty much whatever I need to. When I'm out in the field doing whatever, whether it's at the legislature or community events or doing work with community organizations, I have a guide dog under my desk here, and she is always with me. She's my fourth dog now. For me, the two things that have probably made the most difference in my work life are the computer and my dog.
Because someone doesn't speak clearly doesn't mean that they don't understand you. A lot of us have problems when we're talking to someone who we're having trouble attending to. We think that they don't understand us, which is just not true at all in all cases.
We take on the shame of, oh my God, I wanted a perfect this and a perfect that. Well, they are perfect, of course, inside their own realm of capabilities. Allow them to be. That's all I say to you. And then you get past that, well, they can't do this, or they're not normal, or I feel bad, or I'm ashamed. And then you can advocate properly for that person's needs.
They usually enter the job with the job coach initially, and that's someone that helps bridge that social gap, where you have this person that leads them through and kind of gets them to know the job and everything like that. And maybe after a year or so, the job coach maybe just comes by a couple times a week, eventually to the point where you might not even need a job coach. That person might just do so well in that job and be so independent that a job coach isn't necessary anymore.
Brian is a person who joined the staff, late winter.
Sometimes I clean, sometimes I stock food away and clean shelves off. It's pretty fun.
He's been doing excellent.
I think this is a perfect job for me.
Brian stays on task, which is not a quality that all employees come with. He will search us out when the job is done, wanting to know what to do next.
I fit in very well.
We've always had a policy of getting folks into the store, give them that work experience that they may have trouble finding elsewhere because of their abilities.
I think in the future I might want to work in a grocery store again, because it's very fun to meet more people.
We've had some people who've been in a position for 15 years and have hardly ever missed a day. It's tremendous the work that they can do.
People with disabilities, too, we hide our disabilities a lot because of the ostracism that you get when you say, I have a disability. You have to go in and tell them what your disability is, explain to them how it could be a positive for you and them, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you got to be honest with folks. You can't hide it and then drop it in their lap later and expect them to be, oh, hi. It doesn't work like that.
The population of mentally ill has increased, and so society as a whole has gotten to know more of that population. It's in a lot of families. I work with a wide variety of people, starting from entry-level janitorial work to people that have master's degrees, vice presidents of companies. Deborah has schizophrenia with a cognitive disorder.
You have to be very dedicated to trying to find the job in the first place, because I almost did give up because I hadn't heard anything. And then I'm supposed to give thank you notes to people who have called, but I never even got a call back on those applications, so it was hard.
There's a lot of stereotypes out there for bipolar and schizophrenia. They can't control themselves. They're wild and crazy and unpredictable.
I like to be independent. I like to be on my own. I was getting disappointed in not finding anything, and this came out, and it worked out great for me. And I did have hired me right the day I interviewed, so which was good. I take out the trash when it's full, and I take the dishes into the dishwasher, and they do them in there, and the silverware and the dishes. And then I make sure the tables are clean and wiped off, and take their trays and ask them if they enjoyed their meal, or talk to them.
I think the first word that really comes to my head is just helpful. She's so helpful, and she's willing to do anything. She's very, very friendly. She's very, very outgoing too. That's hard to find. Find someone who's willing to help you out and whatnot. Especially at a place like Panera Bread, where we get incredibly busy over the lunch hour. The line's almost out the door. So it's really, really nice to have someone, who's very friendly, very energetic, who's willing to go out of her way to help you out,
I really like it. It's fast-paced. I don't work too long, so it doesn't really exhaust me.
I'm glad that I have an opportunity to work with her, so.
In '87, I was in a huge car accident, and then I was out of work for 2.5 months, and kind of eased my way back and stayed with my parents. And then I wasn't diagnosed until 1990, because I didn't know these things were seizures. I just called them dizzy spells. And I have a disability. I have seizures, epilepsy, and I went through applying for Social Security disability, something I never thought I'd do, and working with medical assistants. I'm at a much more stable point now. My medications are at a pretty stable level. How much to tell your employer is a challenge, especially for people with hidden disabilities. I mean, obviously, if you're in a wheelchair, there's no doubt. You can't really hide that. My position title here is an independent living specialist. And I work with people with disabilities and working with evaluating their independent living skills.
The position that we were advertising, she had the skill set that matched.
Julie was an intern for me for, about 4 months, several years ago.
I do have some seizures periodically.
I asked her when she was working with me back then, how to handle it and what to do, and she kind of told me.
Well, we were at the Capitol, myself and Lolly and Julie, and it was towards the end of the afternoon, and we were preparing to leave. And I was going to go get the car and come around to the Capitol to pick them up. And as we were having the conversation about, okay, I'll go get the car and I'll come and I'll meet you guys at a particular spot, Lolly and I both noticed that Julie was slowly slipping into a seizure.
Having had this conversation with her, I pretty much knew just to be there to be able to support her if she needed that, either physically or otherwise, and just to let it kind of take its course, which is what it did, and she was fine after that.
There are standard procedures and responses to follow, and I think if employers, just like they would take the time to educate their employees about standard first aid, if they educate their employees about standard response to those kinds of things, seizure activity, that it should take away that fear factor.
Sometimes I can feel them coming and sometimes not. Now that my medications are much better balanced, I can usually feel them, so I can sit down and be quiet or get a glass of water or respect that.
The more that we see people out in the community, you know, when you go to your coffee shop and you see someone there sitting, having coffee with a friend, going to the stores, going to sporting events, it's that kind of gradual exposure that begins to break down the barriers.
There's a study that was done with the Sears Corporation several years ago. They did a study on the cost of employment for people with disabilities. And they found that on average, the accommodations that employees with disabilities required cost less than $40.
It cost my employer $5 for 4 1-inch wooden blocks to elevate my desk so that I could get underneath it, and that's all that was necessary to accommodate my disability, which is pretty severe.
Education. It's constant education and updating people on what the laws are, what actually happens, what alternatives you have. It only takes one person to spread to the next person, and it just keeps going.
I think it's a different set of life experiences. I think people with disabilities are very adaptable, very flexible people, and we need to be.
We are a new part of the workforce. I think a lot of people with disabilities, because of having to do things differently all their lives, we can do that, but people don't realize that that can be of value to your company.
Expanding people's perception that yes, people are different, that you can still have a quality life. Oftentimes somebody who has a disability does have a certain amount of empathy that somebody else may not have.
I think it's good for other employees, non-disabled employees in the workplace, to work with someone with a disability, to understand how someone's life is in many ways very similar, but in some ways different, that can be both positive and enlightening for those peers in the workplace as well.
Companies that are throughout the world, they often may not tend to look for somebody with a disability or not want to hire somebody, but actually sometimes those people with the disabilities are some of your best employees. You know, they're the hardest working and, you know, most fun people to get along with.
Who are they besides my employee? Who are they besides this job description and things they can do? You know, we are the global economy, not just people with disabilities, but all the new cultures of folks that are coming. Asian, Somali, all these different cultures, people have different ideals of what work life is, what home life is. And if you don't communicate, if you make an assumption, well, we always know what assumption does, right?
People with disabilities are out there doing just about anything you can imagine these days.
People with disabilities often stay in jobs longer, and turnover is less. We've found that here within Courage Center, that most of our long-term employees are individuals with disabilities.
My advice would be just to take in consideration the limitations that you have, but also not to be afraid to step out and try things.